County Veterans Memorial Park. Free admission. Bring your families, your friends, your blankets, your lawn chairs, and join the Kingdom of the Sun concert band for a very special evening of music, fireworks, and good old American spirit. For more information, call 624-9291 or go online to kingdomofthesunband.org.
Ocala's information station, 1370 WOCA. Ocala!
All right, 25 minutes before 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in this Monday morning. Do you remember after September 11th, 2001, we learned the word Taliban? Remember that? We learned the word Taliban. Who did that? Everybody said the Taliban did that. And then along the way, we learned the word Al-Qaeda. And now we hear the name ISIS or ICE or ISIL, and they changed the name or whatever. What do you pick? How do you picture these people? Well, I pictured them as renegades. They're living on the dirt. They probably don't have much more than a tent, and they have no technology at all. And of course, that's all wrong. There was a story not too long ago about how ISIS has lots of Toyota trucks or something, and I don't remember the details of that. And they've got lots of money. They're almost like a nation unto themselves, and they're scary because they post videos of themselves cutting off people's heads, and we're not sure whether to believe they're real. Some people say they're fake videos. Some people, of course, say they're absolutely real. We don't know if the tail is wagging the dog. We don't know if we're being manipulated to get into war by some kind of a conspiracy or whatever. Gwynne Dyer would know more about this than I ever will. He has written a book called Don't Panic, ISIS, Terror, and Today's Middle East. And P.S., the one thing I think I'm getting out of the book, because I haven't finished it yet, but the one thing I'm getting out of it is that we are probably not as much of a target as their own countries, and we'll have him explain that. Gwynne Dyer is on the phone. He served in the British, Canadian, and American navies. He is an historian. He taught at the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst, in the United Kingdom. He served on the Board of Governors of Canada's Royal Military College. He is a syndicated columnist as well. Gwynne Dyer, good morning, sir. What an honor.
Good morning, Larry.
Thank you for being on the air with us. Where are you right now?
In London.
Wow.
That's where my base is.
Thank you for calling.
Nice.
What do you think about those submarines over there? ISIS doesn't have submarines or tanks, or do they?
They have tanks.
They do have tanks.
They grabbed a whole bunch of tanks that the United States had given to the Iraqi army when they took half of Iraq back in the spring. Now they got tanks.
So when we try to visualize what they are, who they are, the one thing I can't get my head around with this particular group is how they're able to recruit Americans. You hear these stories all the time, young Americans going over there.
Okay, well, most of those young Americans are Muslims or have become Muslims and have been drawn to this extremist kind of Islam that these guys from bin Laden on down to ISIS, the people today, are all in favor of. But who they are, first of all, they're not, by and large, uneducated people living in tents. They're reasonably well-educated people who are revolutionaries, Arab revolutionaries, and their goal all along, from bin Laden down, has been to come to power in Arab countries and impose their beliefs, this extreme form of Islam, on those countries. Now, everything else they do has to serve that purpose. And I would say, and a lot of people I know say, people who've been on the inside in the military for a long time, the whole point of the 9/11 attacks in the United States was not to bring the United States to its knees. I mean, how are you going to do that? They're not that stupid that they might think that. What they wanted to do was to get the United States to invade a Muslim country. Because they're revolutionaries, they need popular support. They weren't getting a lot because their ideology really is kind of extreme. But the one way you might get a whole lot of popular support is the Americans invade and they radicalize a lot of the local people who don't like being invaded.
Right.
And then they turn to the revolutionaries. So it's how you build support.
And isn't that the same thing they're doing with the beheadings?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I mean, it hasn't stopped. That's still the key strategy, with this one exception. Whereas bin Laden and all the people like him 10, 12, 15 years ago were revolutionaries who were trying to get into power, and so they did need the West to invade. The ISIS people are in power. They've got a state, and it's actually not a small state either. It's half of Iraq and half of Syria, the empty bits of both countries, so it's only about 5 million people. But they've got oil, and they've got armed forces, and they have a government, and so actually they don't want to be invaded. They're not looking for support. They own a state. They expand by conquest. So in a weird way, they're less interested in, sort of doing terrorism in the West than the preceding lot were, because they've got a country. But they're pretty nasty.
But isn't there a bigger goal to take over the rest of the world? Isn't their goal?
Oh yeah, I know. But I mean, any number of crazies have had that goal. That's sort of the long term. In an ideal world, wouldn't it be lovely if?
Yeah, I think
but in practical terms, I mean, Hitler may have wanted to conquer the world, but first of all, he wanted Poland, and that was really about where he stopped. He didn't get much further than that.
Yeah, that's true.
And in the same way, these guys are really concentrating on coming to power in the Arab countries, and they're not going to fritter their energy away and
So then why are they
Western countries?
Why do they still try to wag the dog, to use that phrase again? When they attack Christians, when they chase Jews out of their, I mean,
but that is part of their ideology. These guys are very extreme. Basically, anybody who isn't a Muslim and isn't, in fact, a Sunni Muslim, right kind, is either a slave or a target. They believe that what they call apostates and hypocrites, which is people who are Muslim but don't share their particular beliefs, are worthy of being killed. So that's quite a few people.
And answer this question regarding the way they treat their own people, specifically their women. Is that information correct? That what we're getting in the news, are the women basically sex toys for them?
A lot of women are, but not their own Sunni Muslim women. I mean, the point is that they've captured lots of women who are, sort of Druze or Christian or a wrong kind of Muslim, Shia, things like that. Those women will be used as, slaves and sex toys. No, not their own,
really?
Right kind of Sunni Muslim women. No, they're oppressed, I would say, but they're not treated like that.
Okay.
When they release those videos of the beheadings and things like that, why can't our military, with all of the satellites in place, why can't they zoom in on something like that and really find out where they are and then just obliterate them?
I wish it was that easy. I mean, you can't zoom in if it's happening indoors because there's a roof in the way, and there's an awful lot of territory you got to be looking at, and until you zoomed in, you don't know what's going on there, and you can only zoom in on so much at a time. And, even if you know what's going on, with all the wonderful targeting we've got, the fact is when you put a cruise missile in, it makes a big explosion. When you drop a bomb, it makes a big explosion. There will be innocent people nearby, including, of course, the ones you're trying to save. It just isn't that easy.
So what happens in the course of time? We had a lady on who was Iraqi, I think, or Iranian,
yes.
and she actually was saying that there comes a point where eventually you say, well, I'm just going to give in to this, and I'm guessing that happens in a lot of times in history.
Well, people learn to keep their heads down. It's better not to resist these people, pretend to go along. I mean, I'm sure a lot of the 5 million people they now control in, Islamic State, as they call it, a majority are not keen on them, but, there's no point in getting your head chopped off over it. Keep your head down and go on about your business, and you can go on feeding your kids. That's how people behave in bad times.
And they're almost being romanticized, because you hear of American citizens in England going over there, being part of their movement, or staying here in the U.S. trying to, hurt the people here.
Yeah. Well, the world has a constant fresh supply of 18-year-old males who don't know what to do with their lives, and they're looking for a role, and they're looking for an identity, and they want to do something that makes them important, and of course 99 out of 100 will get through this without serious damage, and one of them will spin out. And if you happen to be a young Muslim American, not 1 in 100, but 1 in 1,000 will probably spin out. I mean, we deal with these problems all the time in other ways. Yeah. You know, kids spinning out through drugs, kids spinning out through gangs. It's not really different. Well, and of course, there's all these websites that will give you all the radical talk and tell you how important you can be if you get involved in this.
Yeah, even somebody like Timothy McVeigh, I don't know what ideology he was following, if any, with the Oklahoma City bombings. But yeah, I mean, if somebody's going to blow up your building, they're going to blow up your building wherever they come from. But I guess to the point of the book, don't panic.
Yeah.
Shouldn't we panic? Shouldn't we panic somewhat? Because if somebody is influenced by their ideology and they're living here, and I mean,
they're dangerous.
Yeah,
they're dangerous. But you know, they're dangerous. I mean, let's put it this way: a little bit of terrorism is one of the costs of doing business in the 21st century. It's like wars on crime. Wars on crime do not end with all the criminals surrendering and then there's perfect peace. You know, you just keep the crime rate down. That's the best you can hope for, and if you're successful, things are pretty good. And in the same way, you know, if you're dealing with radicalization and potential terrorism by young Americans, there's not many of them, and since they're operating as lone wolves, they're probably not going to do more damage than the average school shooting, and they're probably easier to spot because they tend to talk to each other. Yeah. So, you know, deal with it as best you can and accept it once in a while, something will get through. I wish I could say it was easier than that, but it isn't.
But it was, I mean, it's hard to hear that and embrace that when you think of the Boston Marathon bombing and the fact that those two brothers were thinking about going to Manhattan and doing more stuff if they'd gotten away with that. So
yeah, no, I agree, except that, you know, it's now 14 years since 9/11, and the number of Americans who have died in terrorist attacks in the United States is fewer in those 14 years than the number of Americans who will die in car crashes today.
Yeah, that's true too. Let me take a phone call and then we'll have to take a break. The book is called Don't Panic, ISIS, Terror in Today's Middle East. Gwynne Dyer is the author of the book, and let's take that call. Good morning, you're on the air. Thank you for calling and for waiting.
Good morning. I will definitely get a hold of your book. I was wondering if you could comment and enlighten us on areas in your area that are being populated by Muslims, what the condition is, and what the situation is in, you know, close areas to you, like Paris, and if you could just comment on that and how you see it.
Well, sure. I mean, I live in London, and, you know, 2 doors down there's Muslim neighbors, and you know, there's West Indian neighbors, and there's a Chinese neighbor across the street. It's a complicated city. Paris is rather like that, too. Paris is a bit worse because the Muslims in Paris, rather than just living amongst all the other people like they do here, tend to be bunched in suburbs, actually, because they're sort of the middle of the cities for the rich people, and so they're way out of town in largely Muslim suburbs. It's not the best way. Paris has got a real problem that way. They're not, you know, blowing things up a lot, but they certainly aren't part of the, you know, integrated into the community. And, you know, about, I don't know, something like 7% of the French population are Muslims, but mostly from North Africa.
But does that label them in any way? My grandparents were from Germany, and they were in no way were they Nazis.
Exactly, and in no way are the vast majority of French Muslims terrorists or even radicals. I mean, you know, they speak French, and they go to French schools, and if they get a decent job, they go on and make a decent living for themselves and become part of the community. But they come from very poor and underprivileged parts of the cities, and some of them don't make it into the general community and don't get decent jobs, and a great many more of them fall into crime than fall into Islamic radicalism. I mean, there's a very large criminal underworld which is heavily Muslim in France.
Does the strategy of the local police department, the local law enforcement agency, do their strategies have to adjust to the lone wolf, or in your country or in America? Do they have to behave differently in 2015 than they might have in 2001?
Well, they really shouldn't, because if you go too hard on it, what you do is alienate a lot of people who aren't really your enemies, because you're targeting them, you're profiling them, that sort of thing. So you have to be very careful about how you go about it. But obviously they have to be on the lookout for this sort of thing, and so we got lots more security than we used to have in public venues, that sort of thing. No, I don't think that there's no radical change you would want to make which would make matters better. You just have to go on with normal policing and intelligence gathering and keep your eyes open. And an awful lot of this is done electronically with intelligence surveillance and things like that.
Yeah. But
you keep your eyes open on the street as well.
Gwynne Dyer.
I don't live in fear. I presume you don't either.
No, I don't. Let's see, a couple of things to think about. For example, the plane that went down in Egypt, I mean, now they're saying it was probably shot down, and I mean, that's the kind of stuff that scares me, is that they have missiles.
That's the very scary thing, but, it was Egypt, and rather than being like Florida.
Okay.
And, if it was shot down, it's beginning to look like it was shot down. That's what the Russians are saying, at any rate, an external impact.
Yeah.
Then presumably there are terrorists operating in Egypt, in the Sinai Peninsula. That's where they are strong, and it's where the plane was. Maybe they did manage to get, probably from people up in Syria who are fighting the civil war there, an anti-aircraft missile that would reach an airplane flying at 30,000 feet, which is higher than you can get with one of those shoulder-launched things.
Wow.
And brought it down. It wouldn't be the first time. It happened over Ukraine, if you recall, about a year ago.
Yeah, of course. Now the fear of all fears is that one of these renegade guys, ISIS guys, will get an atomic bomb, a nuclear bomb, or whatever we call it nowadays. Yeah. I mean, that would be the fear of all fears.
Very unlikely. I mean, people who have these things do look after them. I've been around nuclear weapons in the military sphere for a long time, and I've never seen one left out. They get put away very carefully.
Wow. All right.
It's really tricky to make one yourself.
I want to take a little break.
Nobody's ever done it.
We'll be right back with Gwynne Dyer to wrap up the interview. The book is called Don't Panic. I will give it away at the end of the interview, and then we'll find out how the rest of us can go buy it. Let's take a little break and be right back.
The weather is brought to you by myfwc.com. Safe boating is no accident. On this Monday, it'll be partly sunny, very warm and humid with a high of 86 to 90. Partly to mostly cloudy Monday nights with some fog around late, low 70 to 74. For Tuesday, some morning fog, otherwise times of clouds and sun, very warm and humid with a shower or thunderstorm in spots, the high 86 to 90. For Wednesday, partly sunny and warm, high 84 to 88. From the Florida Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Joe Lundberg.
Whether you're building it up or knocking it down, get it done, rent it now. Sunbelt Rentals is here to make your job a little easier. Our knowledgeable staff will help you find the right equipment for any job, big or small. Did you know that Sunbelt Rentals carries heaters, air conditioners, generators, lighting, traffic control, and so much more? So whether you're building it up or knocking it down, we've got the equipment you need. Get it done, rent it now. And right now, for a limited time, you can have it for less. Just by mentioning this ad, if you rent it Friday afternoon, you can keep it the whole weekend and only pay for one day. But this is a limited time offer, so stop into Sunbelt Rentals today, Northwest 27th, just a quarter mile east of I-75. For more information, just give us a call, 352-369-9101. 352-369-9101. Sunbelt Rentals. Get it done, rent it now. 352-369-9101.
All right, we got 5 minutes left in this interview, and it's very interesting. Ever since September 11th, 2001, we have this enemy that doesn't have a uniform.
No.
There's no real uniform. The book is called Don't Panic. Gwynne Dyer wrote the book. Gwynne, do you have a website?
Yeah, it's just GwynneDyer.com, GwynneDyer.net. But you have to be able to spell Gwynne, which is the tricky bit. GWYNNEDYER.
Okay.
And it's got all my articles up there. I do 2 a week and things like that.
To make it easy for the listeners, Robin actually has your website already up on the internet on our site. So for those listening, just go to WOCA.com, look at the guest list for today, and you'll see Gwynne's name and the website. But I'm guessing it's on the other booksellers, Amazon and Barnes & Noble, etc.?
Oh, yes, I would imagine so. I mean, I should be shocked if it weren't. I'd have to speak to somebody, wouldn't I?
When we hear about ISIS, that they take children away from their families and raise them in their own way, how do they keep the children under control when the children have lived with their families for maybe 3 or 4 years, and then all of a sudden they're extracted from them, and you think they'd want to cry and go back to them?
Yeah, but these are not nice people. If they cry, they get beaten. If they cry, they don't get fed. They learn pretty quickly not to cry and do what they're told. I mean, people will. Child soldiers is not something that these guys have invented. So you see them all over Africa as well. Because it's really easy to mold children. If you get a hold of them, you control them, you don't let anybody else near them. Pretty soon they believe what you tell them to believe, and they do what you want them to do. It's horrible, but it's easy.
It is. I have a copy of the book. Call me if you want the copy that was sent to us, and the rest of us have to go buy it. It's available as a paperback. Is it just newly released?
Yeah, it just came out this month.
So what about Canada? Is Canada in any different shape than we are?
Well, in the sense that it has gone to most of the wars. It didn't go to Iraq, but it was in Afghanistan the full length of the time. And they lost about 50 people there, but of course it's a much smaller country than the States. And they're bombing in Syria right now, right alongside the U.S., with, again, they've only got 6 planes over there because it's a smaller country.
Right. But the new guy, Trudeau, said he was going to pull out, though.
He did say he was going to pull out, and I'll tell you why. Because he hasn't told me this, mind you, but I can read the runes here. This guy's just won a 5-year term with an absolutely clear field of fire. He can do pretty well anything he wants during the honeymoon period, and there's a lot of things he wants to do. And the one thing that would completely derail him is if one of those Canadian pilots got shot down and captured. And you know what ISIS is going to do with him? They're going to do what they did with that Jordanian pilot. They'll put him in an iron cage and burn him alive while 7 cameras film it. Yeah. Or some other creative, really horrible way of killing him. And there goes Trudeau's honeymoon.
And you've been in the thick of things. Is there any time when the military decisions has had to be bucked with from a soldier's point of view?
Oh yes, of course. I mean, military. Somebody who I can't remember who said it, but force is a. You can't have justice without force. Force is a tool that you use to stop wicked things from happening, and it's not. I'm not a pacifist. But I do rather like my force to be, the people using the force to know who the enemy is and whether this is a worthwhile investment of force and risking our soldiers' lives and what do you expect to get out of it and all the hard questions that tend not to get asked when people panic and just want to do something.
Well, that is a really good point. I just hope that we don't, and I hope our leaders don't. But I hope they stay strong. Your country, our country, and all of our allies. Gwynne, thank you for being on the air with us. It was an awesome conversation.
It's a pleasure, Larry.
Go to GwynneDyer.com. Go to WOCA.com. You'll see Gwynne's website right there. And call us if you need it repeated over the phone. We'll be glad to do that for you. Thank you, Gwynne. That was great.
Take care. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
We'll be right back. This is WOCA.
brought to you by myfwc.com. Safe boating is no accident. On this Monday, it'll be partly sunny, very warm and humid with a high of 86 to 90. Partly to mostly cloudy Monday nights with some fog around late, low 70 to 74. For Tuesday, some morning fog, otherwise times of clouds and sun, very warm and humid with a shower or thunderstorm in spots, the high 86 to 90.
Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
News Radio, I'm Carmen Roberts. Searchers may have found the cargo ship that sank during Hurricane Joaquin.
Try to determine whether or not it broke up before it went down or whether it capsized first and then sank.
Maritime attorney Rod Sullivan. Sonar suggests the ship landed upright under 15,000 feet of water near the Bahamas. It vanished 1 month ago with 33 crew members. The U.S. Supreme Court refuses to hear satellite TV providers' claim against state taxes. Satellite companies say they're unlawfully taxed differently than cable companies. And it's November and time to enroll for